When we think about clean energy, our minds probably go to huge wind turbines or sprawling solar farms, right? We think big. But what if the answer to one of our biggest problems isn't big at all? What if it's microscopic?
Yeah, I know, it sounds a little bit like science fiction, but stick with me here. Today, we are diving into a powerhouse so small you can't even see it, but it has the potential to completely shake up our fuel supply. We are talking about microalgae. So, right away, let's talk about the biggest issue with early biofuels, that whole food versus fuel debate. If you're using farmland to grow corn for ethanol, that's less land to grow corn for food. It's a real problem. But microalgae, they just completely sidestep that entire issue. You can grow them on land that's no good for farming, and you can harvest them all year round. That is a huge, game-changing advantage. And let's just quickly remember why this is so important. Our entire modern world runs on fossil fuels. But the writing is on the wall. They're a finite resource, they pollute our environment, and, of course, they are the #1 driver of climate change, pumping CO2 into our atmosphere. So, this brings us to our potential hero, microalgae. I want you to think of them as these tiny, single-celled biological factories. They are brilliant at one thing in particular, converting sunlight and CO2 into oils that are packed with energy. And when I say they're brilliant at it, I am not exaggerating. Get this, some species of microalgae can be made of up to 70% oil. To put that in perspective, soybeans, a crop we already use for biofuel, they top out at about 20%. The potential yield here is it's on a whole other level. And here is where it gets even better. It's like a 2-for-1 deal. Microalgae don't just produce a cleaner fuel, they actually clean the air while they're at it. They literally consume carbon dioxide, our biggest greenhouse gas, and lock it away to grow. We then turn their growth into fuel. It's not just carbon neutral, it's an active part of the climate solution. The advantages just keep stacking up. Their growth rate is absolutely astounding. Some can double their mass in just a few hours. A few hours! They can be grown in wastewater, which means they're cleaning our water while they grow. And after you get the fuel out, the leftovers can be used for bioplastics, animal feed, you name it. This is a remarkably versatile organism. So, the potential is crystal clear. But how does this actually work? How do we get from a microscopic organism, green goo, to the actual fuel you can put in a vehicle? Let's walk through the process. Okay, so there are two main ways to grow algae. First, you've got open ponds. They're basically what they sound like, large, shallow raceways of water. They're cheap and easy to make really big, but they're vulnerable to weather and contamination. On the flip side, you have closed photobioreactors. Think of these as high-tech greenhouses for algae. You get amazing control and high yields, but they are way more expensive and much harder to build on a massive scale. This journey from the pond to the pump really has a few key steps. It all starts with feeding the algae CO2. Then comes the harvest, which is just the tricky process of getting the algae out of the water. After that, we have to extract the valuable oil. And finally, a chemical process turns that raw oil into pure biodiesel. Now, that final step has a fancy, sciencey name, transesterification. But don't let the word scare you, it's really just a simple recipe. You take the algae oil, you mix it with an alcohol and a catalyst, you heat it up, and that reaction separates it all out into two useful things, clean-burning biodiesel and glycerol. This all sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Almost like a perfect solution. So that leads to the obvious question. If it's so great, why aren't we all driving algae-powered cars already? Well, like any truly revolutionary technology, there are some major hurdles still to overcome. And the single biggest hurdle, the one that everything else comes back to, is this: money. Right now, making fuel for microalgae is just a lot more expensive than drilling for oil or even producing other biofuels. So where are all these costs coming from? It's not just one thing. Building the cultivation systems is a big upfront investment, but the real budget killers are harvesting the algae out of all that water and then actually extracting the oil. Both of those steps are incredibly energy intensive, and energy costs money. So these costs create a whole bunch of challenges. The process uses a ton of energy, sometimes so much that it's hard to get a net energy gain. Those cheap open ponds, they can get contaminated easily. And let's be honest, it's incredibly tough for a new technology like this to compete with the low price of fossil fuels, especially without consistent government support to help level the playing field. But the story doesn't end there, not at all. Researchers and innovators all over the globe are tackling these challenges head on. There is a very clear path forward for making microalgae biofuel not just possible, but actually profitable and scalable. One of the most exciting paths forward is genetic engineering. Using incredible tools like CRISPR, scientists are working on creating super algae, strains that produce even more oil, grow faster, and are tougher and more resistant to all those stresses out in the real world. Another really smart strategy is something called the integrated biorefinery. The idea here is instead of just focusing on fuel, you use every single part of the algae. After the oil is extracted, the leftover biomass is converted into other valuable products. This creates multiple streams of revenue, making the whole operation far more economically attractive. And finally, the science can't do it alone. None of this happens in a bubble. We need smart, consistent policies from governments. Things like tax credits, subsidies, and renewable fuel standards. Those are the things that create a stable market and give companies the confidence to pour in the big investments needed to scale this industry up. So we're left with this big question. The challenges of cost and scale, they are very real, but the solutions are within our grasp. Through scientific innovation and smart policy, this tiny organism really does have the potential to help power our world and clean our air. The giant solution to our energy problem might just be waiting microscopically in a pond near you.